At 40, I thought certainty was something you earned. I had earned it. A senior position in corporate finance, a restored townhouse in Brooklyn Heights, the kind with brick walls and quiet neighbors who never ask questions. A reputation built on discipline and restraint. And Laura, my wife of 11 years, intelligent, composed, predictable, predictable, until she wasn't. It happened on an ordinary evening. No intuition. No warning. Just a mistake. Laura left her phone on the kitchen shelf when she went to shower. We didn't believe in locked phones. No secrets, no paranoia. Or so I thought. The screen lit up. One message. Suite 904. Like before, I'll be waiting. Sender, Ethan Rowe. The name landed heavier than the words. Rowe Holdings wasn't just another firm. Ethan Rowe was Manhattan money. Real estate, private equity, influence. A man photographed shaking hands with mayors, standing beside his polished wife at charity auctions. I didn't touch the phone. Didn't photograph it. Didn't confront her. I poured a drink and waited. When Nora came out, hair damp robe loose. She smiled like she always did. "What time's your board call tomorrow?" I asked. 9, she said icily, scrolling through the very phone that had just ended my marriage. No pause. No guilt. That's when it hit me. This wasn't new. "I'll be late tonight," she added. Fundraiser prep ran over. I nodded. "I'll eat out." Another lie. My first. Instead, I followed her. At 7:10 p.m., Laura exited her office building in Midtown. She didn't call a cab, didn't head for the subway. She walked calmly into the Harrington Hotel, Suite 904. I sat across the street, engine running, pulse steady. Every instinct screamed to go inside, to expose everything, right there. But anger is loud, and loud people lose. So, he left. That night, I didn't sleep beside my wife. I lay awake realizing something far worse than betrayal. She hadn't slipped, she had chosen. And choices have consequences. What Laura didn't know. What Ethan Rowe definitely didn't know was that I don't react. I calculate, and once I do, I don't miss. For the next few days, I said nothing. That silence wasn't weakness. It was preparation. During the day, I played my role perfectly. The attentive husband, the dependable executive, the man with nothing to hide. At night, I started pulling threads. I didn't need certainty. I needed confirmation. That's when I called Marcus Hawley, former NYPD. Now, private intelligence. The kind of man who doesn't ask why, only how fast. I need surveillance, I told him. Discreet. Documented. No mistakes. He paused. "Who?" "My wife," I said. And Ethan Rowe. That pause was longer. "You sure you want this?" he asked. "Some doors don't close once you open them." "I already walked through," I replied. "I just need the lights on." The first report came back in 48 hours. Photos, time, stumps, hotel entries that matched Laura's late meetings, private dinners billed to corporate cards, elevators, hallways. Familiar intimacy. 7 months. Not a lapse. A lifestyle. The hottest part wasn't the evidence. It was mornings, watching Laura get dressed, knowing exactly where those clothes would end up, listening to her talk about deadlines while omitting the most important detail of her day, sleeping beside her, wondering whose name was in her head when she closed her eyes. One night, she wore a black dress I'd never seen before. "New?" I asked. She smiled without missing a beat. Old. You just don't notice these things. Marcus had photographed Ethan buying it for her 2 weeks earlier. You look great, I said, and the sick truth was, I meant it. That scared me more than the betrayal. A week later, Marcus brought something unexpected. Rose bleeding, he said, sliding a folder across my desk. Financially, inside were transaction maps, shell accounts, falsified projections. Classic misdirection, Marcus continued. Investor money covering losses. If regulators look close enough, it collapses. How long? I asked. Months. Maybe weeks. That's when the situation changed. This wasn't just about infidelity anymore. This was leverage. Ethan Rowe wasn't powerful. He was exposed. It just didn't know it yet. And Laura? She was betting her future on a man already sinking. That night, Laura came home late, smelling of unfamiliar cologne. She talked too much, smiled too hard. I listened, filed everything. Oh, because here's the truth she never understood. I didn't want revenge. I wanted control, and control only comes when the other side doesn't realize the game has already ended. By the time they did, it would be far too late. Until that point, everything had been clean. Facts, evidence, distance. Then I met Rachel Rowe. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't suspicious. And she definitely wasn't prepared. Every Thursday afternoon, she volunteered at a literacy nonprofit near Soho, helping immigrant kids learn English. No pop, no social games. Just quiet purpose. I waited until the session ended. Señora, ¿cómo estará? Pussy. Rowe, I said when she stepped outside, surprised but polite. My name is Daniel Moore. We've met briefly at charity events. Recognition flickered. Yes. Laura's husband. May I speak with you for a moment? She studied my face, then nodded. At a cafe across the street. I didn't waste time. I wouldn't be here if this wasn't necessary. I placed a slim envelope on the table. Before you open it, understand this. What's inside will end your marriage as you know it. She didn't flinch. That told me everything. The photos did the rest. Rachel didn't cry, didn't scream. She examined each image slowly, like evidence in a courtroom. How long? She asked. 7 months. Her hands finally trembled. I suspected, she said quietly. He blamed work. I blamed myself. I slid the second folder toward her. This is worse. Financial projections. Full statements. Shell transfers. Her breath caught. He told me the company was expanding. It is, I said. Just not honestly. Rachel looked up, her eyes sharp now. Why show me this? Because silence protects the wrong people, I replied. And because what happens next needs to be public. She leaned back, processing. You want to expose him? Yes. And Laura? Yes. There was a long pause. Then she nodded once. Good. We didn't toast. We didn't smile. This wasn't revenge. It was correction. Over the next 2 weeks, we met quietly. Different cafes, different times. Burner phones. No patterns. Rachel had access, hadn't event schedules, internal donor briefings, media coordination. The Metropolitan Arts benefit was 3 weeks away, 800 guests. Investors, journalists, board members, and Ethan Rowe was the keynote honoree. Perfect. One afternoon, as we finalized timing, Rachel froze. Don't look," she whispered. Laura just walked in. I didn't turn. Instead, I reached across the table and took Rachel's hand. Right on cue, Laura's voice cut through the air.
"Daniel?"
I turned, surprised. "Laura, what are you doing here?" Her eyes dropped to her hands. Rachel stood calmly. "Hello, Laura. We were discussing the benefit." Laura's smile was professional, but thin. I didn't realize my husband took such interest in my events. "People evolve," I said. She didn't stay long, and she left shaken. That night, Laura was unusually attentive. Too kind. Too curious. Fear had entered the room. She didn't know why, but Ethan did. Marcus called the next morning. "Rose moving money," he said. "Fast. Offshore. Panicking. Good. Because panic makes people sloppy. And sloppy people destroy themselves. All I had to do now was give them the stage." The gala night arrived. The Metropolitan Arts Center sparkled under chandeliers and city lights. 800 of New York's elite mingled, unaware that tonight's show was about to deviate sharply from the script. Rachel and I arrived early. She wore a bold emerald gown, sharp yet elegant. Her presence demanded attention, exactly what we needed. I stayed close, a subtle anchor, making sure everything was in place. Laura was already orchestrating the setup, clipboard in hand. She froze when she saw us. I smiled blandly. "Evening, Laura," I said. "Daniel." "Rachel," she replied, too carefully. Her composure was fraying. We seated ourselves strategically. The head table, flanking Ethan Rowe. Rachel on one side, me on the other. The room buzzed. Cameras flashed. The music swelled, but my focus was fixed on them. Dinner passed as a calculated war. I played the attentive guest, making small talk, letting Rachel dominate conversation with influential donors, deliberately drawing eyes and breaking Rowe's rhythm. Ethan shifted uneasily. Every laugh from Rachel, every casual touch to my arm, chipped away at his facade. Laura tried to regain control, but she was outmatched. She didn't realize we held all the cards. Then the moment came. The lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage. The screen flickered. First came the usual video. Polished philanthropy, grand openings, donations. The room murmured appreciation, and then the edits began. Photos of Ethan and Laura in intimate settings, hotel receipts with timestamps, emails, and text screenshots, all paired with financial documents detailing Ethan's misappropriation of investor funds. Gasps. Phones lifted to record. A few attendees whispered. Ethan's face drained of color. He stammered, tried to interrupt, but the projection continued. Relentless, I raised my glass and addressed the room. "To truth," I said, "and to accountability." The doors swung open. SEC agents and NYPD stepped in, moving directly toward Ethan. The chaos was instantaneous. Investors demanded answers. Guests whispered furiously. Cameras flashed. Ethan protested, but it was too late. Every lie he relied on had been stripped away. Laura tried to reach me across the table. "Daniel, please." I looked at her calmly. "You chose him. Now you face the consequences of that choice." Rachel squeezed my hand. Her eyes told me everything. Shock, triumph, justice served. We didn't need words. By the time Ethan Rowe was handcuffed, shouting about lawyers and contracts, the room had witnessed the full weight of his duplicity. Outside, the cool night air hit me as Rachel and I walked to the car. The city lights reflected off the glass facades. "Did it work?" she asked softly. "Yes," I said. "And now we wait. Because once truth is public, there's no undoing it. Once fear takes hold, there's no bargaining. And once the powerless become powerful, there's no turning back." Have you ever felt completely betrayed? Imagine discovering that the person you trusted most, the person you built a life with, was the architect of your downfall. This is a story of Sarah, a woman who had it all: a loving husband, a successful business, and a beautiful life. Or so she thought. One morning, her world shattered. News broke of a massive financial scandal, and at its center was her husband. Mark. He had been running a fraudulent scheme, using their shared company as a front, and had vanished, leaving Sarah to face the ruin. The fallout was immediate and brutal. The business they built together collapsed overnight. Their assets were frozen, their home was seized, and Sarah found herself not just broke, but publicly shamed. The media painted her as an accomplice. Friends turned their backs, and she was left with nothing but crippling debt and a reputation in tatters. The betrayal cut deeper than any financial loss. Mark had not only stolen their money, he had stolen her life, her identity, and her trust in everything she knew. For months, Sarah was adrift in a sea of despair. The anger was a constant fire in her chest. How could she have been so blind? Every memory was now tainted by his deceit. But amidst the anger and the grief, a new feeling started to emerge. A steely resolve. She refused to be a victim. She wouldn't let Mark's actions define her future. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about justice. It was about reclaiming her name. So, the fight began. Sarah spent countless hours poring over old company records, financial statements, and email archives. It was a painstaking process, like searching for a needle in a haystack of digital lies. She started noticing small inconsistencies, transactions that didn't add up, and coded messages she had once overlooked. Each discovery was a small victory, a piece of the puzzle that brought her closer to the truth. She realized Mark hadn't acted alone. He had a network of accomplices who had helped him cover his tracks. Armed with this evidence, Sarah went to the authorities. At first, they were skeptical. They saw her as a spurned wife, possibly seeking revenge. But her evidence was undeniable. She had meticulously documented every fraudulent transfer, every hidden account, and every person involved. She became an unofficial investigator, working alongside the detectives who had initially dismissed her. Her intimate knowledge of the business, combined with a relentless drive, turned the tide of the investigation. Slowly but surely, the intricate web Mark had woven began to unravel. His accomplices were brought in for questioning, and one by one, they started to crack under the pressure. The trail eventually led investigators to a small, non-extradition country where Mark was living a new life under a false identity, funded by the money he had stolen from investors, from his partners, and from Sarah herself. The international manhunt was on. The day Mark was finally apprehended and extradited back to face trial was a day Sarah will never forget. Seeing him in handcuffs wasn't a moment of triumphant joy, but one of somber closure. The legal battle was long and grueling, but with Sarah's evidence and testimony, the prosecution built an airtight case. Justice was served. Mark and his co-conspirators were sentenced to long prison terms, and a process began to recover some of the stolen funds for the victims. But for Sarah, the story didn't end there. True revenge wasn't seeing Mark behind bars. It was rebuilding her life on her own terms, with a small portion of the recovered funds and a loan from one of the few friends who stood by her. She started a new business. This time, It was something entirely her own, a consulting firm helping small businesses protect themselves from the very kind of fraud that destroyed her life. Her past became her strength. Her story, once a source of shame, became a powerful testament to her resilience. Today, Sarah is more successful than ever before. She's a respected leader in her field, a champion for ethical business practices, and an inspiration to countless people who have faced their own devastating setbacks. She learned that true justice isn't just about punishing the guilty. It's about reclaiming your power, rewriting your narrative, and building a new beginning from the ashes of the old. Her story proves that even after the deepest betrayal, you can find the strength not just to survive, but to Thank you for watching. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible stories of resilience and justice. We'll see you in the next one.
Power doesn't disappear after you use it. It lingers. In the weeks following the scandal, I felt it in subtle ways. The extended glances, the careful tone people used around me, the unspoken understanding that I was no longer just another executive passing through rooms. People knew what I was capable of. That knowledge creates distance. At work, colleagues treated me with a new kind of respect, not admiration, but caution. The kind reserved for someone who doesn't bluff. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't threatened anyone publicly. And yet, everyone understood. I had ended a man's world without firing a single shot. That realization unsettled me. Because power, once tasted, asks a dangerous question. Would you do it again? Rachel noticed the change before I did. You're quieter, she said one evening as we walked along the river. Thinking, I replied, that's not the same thing. She was right. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even hurt. I was recalibrating, trying to understand who I'd become after stripping away illusion, marriage, loyalty, and mercy in one calculated act. Ethan eventually took a plea deal. 12 years. Federal prison. No press conference. No apology. Just a transfer from relevance to obscurity. Laura sent one final message weeks later. I hope you're happy. I stared at it longer than I expected. Happiness wasn't the right word. I replied with nothing. Because the truth was simpler and colder. I was free. Rachel and I didn't rush anything. We didn't pretend our connection was pure or untouched by circumstance. It was forged in collapse, sharpened by truth, and grounded in mutual awareness. No illusions. No lies. That made it stronger than anything I'd known before. One night, sitting in her apartment, she asked the question I'd been avoiding. Do you regret how it ended? I didn't answer immediately. I regret that it was necessary, I said finally, but not that it happened. She nodded. No judgment. No fear. That's when I understood something important. I hadn't just exposed Ethan and Laura. I had exposed myself. I learned I wasn't the man who forgives quietly and moves on. I was the man who finishes things, thoroughly. That knowledge came with weight. Because integrity isn't softness, and restraint isn't weakness. Sometimes, justice requires precision. Months later, life settled into a quieter rhythm. The city moved on. New scandals replaced old ones. Names faded. But inside me, something permanent remained. I trusted differently now. I loved deliberately. And I never ignored patterns disguised as accidents. Power didn't corrupt me. It clarified me. And clarity, once earned, is irreversible. Some people survive betrayal and spend the rest of their lives afraid. Others survive it and become dangerous, not to the innocent, but to those who mistake silence for submission. I knew which one I was now, and I had no intention of ever forgetting it.
Time doesn't heal everything. That's another comforting lie people repeat because the truth is harder to face. Time doesn't heal, it reveals. Months passed. Then a year. The city forgot Ethan Rowe. His name became a footnote. A cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms. Laura rebuilt her life quietly, far from the circles where her choices once mattered. We never spoke again. And we didn't need to. Some chapters close without conversation. Rachel and I continued forward. Not as a fairy tale, not as a redemption arc, but as two people who had seen the worst in others and refused to lie to themselves about it. Our relationship was calm, intentional. No games, no hidden phones, no performance. Trust wasn't blind anymore. It was informed. One evening, while walking through the city after dinner, Rachel stopped and asked something unexpected. If none of this had happened, would you still be the same man? I didn't answer right away. I thought about who I was before. Confident, successful, but asleep. Living inside assumptions, believing loyalty was guaranteed because I had earned it. No, I said finally. And that's the uncomfortable part. She smiled faintly. Growth usually is. That was the lesson betrayal taught me. Not pain, not anger, not revenge. Awareness. I learned that character isn't tested when life is stable. It is tested when you re-handed truth you didn't ask for and power you didn't expect. Most people either explode or collapse. Very few stay standing. I didn't win because I destroyed someone else. I won because I didn't destroy myself trying to ignore reality. That's the difference no one talks about. Justice isn't loud. Strength isn't dramatic. And closure doesn't always come with forgiveness. Sometimes closure is simply refusing to lie to yourself or to anyone else ever again. Rachel leaned against me as the city lights reflected in the glass towers around us. Do you ever miss who you were? She asked. I shook my head. I respect him, I said, but I don't miss him. Because the man I became understood something essential. Love without honesty is just comfort. Success without clarity is just noise. And peace doesn't come from avoiding conflict. It comes from surviving truth. Some people go through betrayal and spend the rest of their lives afraid of it happening again. Others go through it and realize they can survive anything, as long as they refuse to betray themselves. I walked away from that chapter awake. And once you're awake, you never go back to sleep. You think the story ends when the cameras turn off. It doesn't. It ends when the consequences finish spreading. And that takes time. Months after the scandal, I started noticing the echoes. Not headlines, not gossip. Behavior. Invitations changed. Certain rooms felt quieter when I entered. People listened more carefully and spoke less freely. I hadn't become famous. I'd become defined. In finance, reputation isn't about what you say. It's about what people believe you're willing to do. And now, they believed something new about me. At first, that bothered me. I'd spent years being predictable, professional, controlled. Now there was an edge to how people assessed me. A silent recalculation. Then I realized something important. This was the cost of clarity. You don't expose truth without becoming part of it. Rachel felt it too. Her foundation gained traction faster than expected. Victims of fraud came forward not just because of legal support, but because someone had finally proven that powerful people could fall. That made her dangerous in a different way. You ever feel like we crossed a line we can't uncross? She asked one night. I didn't answer immediately. Lines don't disappear, I said. They just become visible. We weren't celebrated heroes. We weren't villains either. We were reminders, and reminders make people uncomfortable. One afternoon, I ran into an old acquaintance, someone who had invested with Ethan early on, but quietly exited before the collapse. You handled that efficiently, he said, choosing his words carefully. That wasn't efficiency, I replied. That was inevitability. He didn't argue, because deep down, everyone knew the same truth. What happened to Ethan wasn't exceptional. It was overdue. That's the part no one likes to admit. Scandals don't shock because they're rare. They shock because they confirm suspicions people were too comfortable to act on. I wasn't special. I was just unwilling to look away. And once you stop looking away from lies, from patterns, from people, your life changes permanently. Not dramatically. Quietly. The real aftermath wasn't prison sentences or ruined reputations. It was this. I no longer mistook peace for silence, or loyalty for habit, or love for familiarity. And I never again assumed that stability meant safety, because I had learned something most people never do until it's too late. Truth doesn't end stories. It redefines them. Closure is another word people misuse. Most of the time, it doesn't come from answers. It comes from realizing you don't need them anymore. Nearly a year after everything collapsed, I received a message I didn't expect. Not from Laura. Not from Ethan. From Michael Hayes. Laura's father. Short. Direct. No emotion. I'd like to speak. No lawyers. No drama. I considered ignoring it, but avoiding the past doesn't make you stronger. It just makes you unfinished. We met at a quiet restaurant outside the city. Neutral ground. No memories attached. He looked older than I remembered. Not fragile, just worn down by consequences he couldn't control. I won't insult you by pretending I didn't know something was wrong, he said after we sat down. That would be dishonest. I respected that. I raised her to value stability, he continued. Status. Security. She chose what she thought would preserve those things. And lost them, I said. He nodded. No defense. No argument. She didn't fall because of you, he said. She fell because she believed comfort was the same as character. That landed harder than anything Laura ever said. I'm not here to ask forgiveness, he added. I'm here to ask whether you regret walking away. I didn't answer immediately, because the honest answer wasn't clean. I regret that staying would have required me to lie to myself, I said, and I don't do that anymore. He absorbed that. Then, quietly, you didn't ruin her life. I know. She did. We finished the meal without ceremony. No apology, no reconciliation, no cinematic resolution. Just two people acknowledging reality and leaving it where it belonged. On the drive home, I didn't feel relief. I felt finality. That's different. Rachel noticed as soon as I walked in. You look lighter, she said. I closed the door, I replied. Good, she said. Some doors don't need slamming. They just need locking. That night I understood something critical. The past doesn't demand confrontation. It demands clarity. I didn't need Laura to admit anything. I didn't need Ethan to explain himself. I didn't need justice to feel personal. I needed alignment between what I knew, what I did, and who I was willing to be. Most people never reach that point. They keep old wounds open because pain feels more familiar than peace. I didn't want familiarity anymore. I wanted precision. And that's when I knew there was only one thing left to do. Not to expose, not to confront, not to prove anything, just to move forward. Deliberately. Because when you stop carrying unfinished conversations, you finally hear your own thoughts clearly, and that's when the story is actually ready to end. People think endings are loud. They expect apologies, revenge, forgiveness, some dramatic, emotional release. That's not how real endings work. Real endings are quiet. They happen the moment you stop explaining yourself. Life didn't suddenly become easier after everything ended. It became cleaner. No double meanings. No second-guessing tone, timing, loyalty. No energy wasted pretending something broken could still be trusted. That's what most people don't understand. Betrayal isn't what ruins you. Negotiating with it does. Rachel and I never talked about forever. We talked about alignment, about honesty, without theatrics, about choosing each other daily, not out of fear of loss, but out of clarity. That was enough. One evening, standing alone on a quiet street, I caught my reflection in a dark window. Older, sharper, calmer, and I realized something that would have terrified the man I used to be. I didn't need to be liked anymore. I didn't need validation. I didn't need closure from people who lacked integrity. I didn't need to prove I was right. I only needed one thing: self-respect. Without compromise. That's the real transformation no one warns you about. When you stop tolerating lies, your circle gets smaller. When you stop explaining boundaries, conversations get shorter. When you stop betraying yourself, peace stops being fragile. Most people stay trapped because they confuse familiarity with safety. I didn't. I learned that love without truth is a liability. That loyalty without accountability is weakness. The story everyone else remembers is about exposure, scandal, downfall. That's not the story I tell. I tell the story of a man who saw the truth, accepted the cost, and didn't flinch. A man who didn't burn the world down but refused to live in a lie. Because at the end of the day, strength isn't how hard you fight. It's how cleanly you walk away. And once you do, you don't just survive the betrayal. You outgrow it.